realfaith.org.au.
Kids will say to me, I was at such and such a place and people were saying all Aboriginals are, and I say to them, have you ever met any Aboriginal people? I've been to an Aboriginal settlement, and this is what they're like. They run their own radio station in Alice Springs, they run a medical service, all of this stuff. That's really a lasting legacy, and it does carry over into thinking about other cultures too.
Welcome to Real Faith, conversations about the impact faith has on our lives and the challenges we go through, helping us today and giving us hope for tomorrow. That's real people, real life and real faith with Eric Scatterbo.
Well, our guest today is once again retired high school teacher Colin Youl. Last time we heard his journey to becoming a teacher at a Christian school and how he's a bit unorthodox with long hair tied in a ponytail and an earring. Also, because of his heritage, he wears a kilt from time to time. When we ended last time, Colin was beginning to share about how he became involved in taking generations of students, including my own children, to Yuendamu Aboriginal Settlement, about 300 kilometers northwest of Alice Springs. Now here's more of my conversation with Colin Youl. One of the experiences we want to chat with you about is your legacy of taking students every year to the Yuendamu Aboriginal Settlement north of Alice Springs. How did that come about?
When I started teaching at Mount Evelyn Christian School, MEX for shorthand, it was a pretty radical Christian school. It didn't.
In what way?
Oh, it didn't have uniforms, for one thing.
And it allowed students to have teachers with ponytails and earrings.
Yeah, true. And really, the school really believed in writing our own curriculum and making it thoroughgoingly Christian. So,
everything.
Yeah. So it wasn't prayer at the start of the day and prayer at the end of the lessons or something like that. It would rather...
And nothing in between.
Yeah, precisely.
Related to Christianity.
So, in biology, it talked about the impact of Christian belief and thought. Creation in design, is, I think, a really important factor.
Yeah.
See, people who are totally anti-Christian, anti-God, totally secular, mechanistic world still talk, don't they, about how your ear is designed, boom, boom. It's such a hard word to avoid.
Yeah.
And in the maths
And
area,
how could it have come about without it being designed?
Yeah, well, that's a big leap of faith, isn't it, really?
Exactly. Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing about MEX...
Oh, yeah, we wanted to get to Yuendamu eventually.
Yeah. We wanted our teaching to be hands-on as much as possible. So if you did a unit on forestry, you went to a forest, you talked to people who cut trees down, you talked to people who didn't like trees being cut down. So you get into business studies, you go to a supermarket, you talk to people who run businesses. You don't just do an academic study.
Not
turn to page 14 of your book.
Yeah.
In the year 10, when I started, my first year, what a bunch of out there rascals they were.
The students.
The students,
Oh, not the other teachers.
No. We had a unit on Japan, and the principal said to me, Colin, that's all very well, but how do you practically do Japan? We can't go to Japan.
Yeah.
We can get stuff from the Japanese embassy, and that's all packaged, very nicely tied up, very neat. Why don't we should do something on Aboriginal studies? Now, Eric, this is 1978 or thereabouts. No one anywhere did that sort of thing. It was unheard of. And so Jack Mickelson, our principal, gave me license to have time off from school to go and research Aboriginality in our area. Now, today, everyone knows Wurundjeri is the tribal name of the major group from here. But in those days, people didn't.
The east side of Melbourne.
Yeah. Even Aboriginal people didn't. I went to some meetings of the Aboriginal Educational Consultative Group and found that they were as lost in expressing their Aboriginality as anybody was. But they knew that they were Aboriginal, So we put together a bit of a program, and Jack, the principal, who always wanted to be a bus driver, said,
interesting combination.
Oh yeah. Instead of just using black and white 16mm film, which was almost always about tribal people living in Western Australia or the desert, and quite dated. We should actually try to make it very much more hands-on. So we hired a bus with a driver and a jockey who was the man's wife. She did the cooking, organised duty groups and whatnot. And we headed off for the Northern Territory. We just felt we can't do it another way. There's no Aboriginal groups here. Now there are, but not then. So, of course, we did the standard thing. Adelaide, up the centre, Ayers Rock, Olgas, Alice Springs. We made contact with Aboriginal groups in Alice through one of the school teachers, connections there, a wonderful saint of the Lord called Trevor Cutter, who was working for the Central Australian Aboriginal Medical Association. He'd been a doctor in Ethiopia, and now he's working there. And he introduced me to Pat Dodson, who's now a senator. You'll know him from the TV, wears a hat, has a big beard. And Trevor took us to his house and talked about his work with Aranda people, in particular, Luritja people from south of Alice Springs. Trevor said, you must go to a settlement. Otherwise, it's just window dressing. A lot of schools ran a centre trip, and they got a bus. They went to Alice Springs, went to Ayers Rock, and then drove home again, or flew one way.
Oh, the tourist spots.
Yeah, easy to do. No contact with people at all. And if you can do that very easily, because the people keep their distance. Now, it so happened that one of the board members at our school had a brother who had been principal of the school at Yuendamu, where the people speak Walbri as their first language. Often they speak Luritja or Aranda or Kadich as a second or third language, and then there'll be English. In those days in particular, there was no media presence there. Radio didn't really come in, only shortwave, no television.
Pretty remote.
And it was 300 k's of dirt road from anywhere.
Wow.
Yeah.
Kind of risky taking students.
Yep. On that first centre trip where we hired the bus, the driver and his wife, bless them, just poured racist vitriol into the ears of our children.
Oh, wow.
It was astounding. They couldn't help themselves because that's how they saw the world, I guess. And the kids
just had a really negative view of Aboriginal community.
Yeah, telling me. Kids would say to me, Mr. Youl, he said this, that's clearly not true. And they were right, he couldn't see, he could not see the wood for the trees, I could give examples, but it's not worth doing in the time. So anyway, back to the principal of the school. Herman Nyhouse, bless him, said, get in touch with the missionary at Yuendamu. Yuendamu's the place to go because he knew Yuendamu. So we did. We got in touch with the missionary, Ed Kingston, lovely man, Jackamara. And Ed invited us to come out. And so on our own bus this time, with our own, Jack Driver, the principal who wanted to be a bus driver, got to fulfil his dream with a trailer we threw together and cooks that we got from school. No one from outside at all. Off we went. We had a bit of an accident with the bus, had to be repaired. That's all right. We went to Ayers Rock, Uluru and Katajuta. On our first visit, I'd purchased a few books about the area, about dreaming and whatnot. And so I was able to run just the start of my own walks around the rock. And then off to Yuendamu. Wow, well, what a mind-blowing experience that was. Here were people who did speak English as a third language, and they all referred to one another by their skin names.
What does that mean, skin names?
Wow. Every Walbri person, and this is true right across the country probably, different numbers, but every Walbri person is born with one of 8 names. They get it through their mother. I was given the skin name Japajari, which meant my wife was automatically Nakamara, and my children are Nungarai and Jungarai. N names are the girls, J names are the boys. You have a skin name because Wanda and John have got skin names. So
my children?
You've got the skin name, yes, your children. Mm-hmm. You've got the skin name appropriate to their father. And
they probably told me at one
mother.
time, but
yes.
I think I've long since forgotten it. Yeah.
Of course. When we were at Yuendamu, with our minds reeling, we played a footy match.
Huh.
And when we rocked up, they'd been waiting on the oval for us in their uniforms, ready to do combat.
Oh, wow.
An oval with not one blade of grass, mind you.
Yeah.
And it was their A-grade team. And we had a bunch of year 10s, some of whom could play a bit and many of whom really couldn't.
Yeah.
So the first quarter, we were massacred. And at quarter time, Neville Paulson, bless him, who's gone to be with the Lord now, he was president of the Baptist Union of the Northern Territory for a while. Mm. And Neville Paulson said to me, the teams are a bit uneven, maybe we'll swap them around a little bit. Mm. And then at half-time he said, maybe swap a little bit more. At three-quarter time, a little bit more fine-tuning. And at the end of the game he said, teams are pretty even now, that's really good. Very Walpurgis way of viewing things, I think. You know, you help the person who needs help.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So basically the sides were integrated.
Yeah.
Some
completely.
From the school, some from the community.
Yes, which meant every one of our kids was talking to one of theirs. It wasn't like
smart.
us against them.
Right.
Not at all.
So now you're working side by side.
Yeah. Oh, the church there put on a Christian corroboree at night.
What does that mean?
A dance and singing.
Yeah.
Put together by the people. Mm-hmm. On this was probably the story of Calvary, I think, and resurrection. I think that's the one they did.
So there is a Christian influence on the community.
Yeah. There's been a Baptist mission there since first contact, or not quite. Anyway, after World War II, when the government was firing rockets from Woomera Rocket Range up to that area near Lake Mackay, it came to the attention of the government that there were Aboriginal people living a tribal nomadic life out there, and that if a rocket fell on some of them, it would not look good at the United Nations. So these people were all rounded up, put in trucks and taken into 3 settlements. And many of them then walked back to where they'd come from over the next several months, and then had to be rounded up again and brought in. And over a short period of time, they became very dependent on government rations. And so Yuendamu, Willowra and another place were set up. But from the very start, the churches were the Australian churches, the main organs of, what would you say, integration, acclimatisation, whatever, and education broadly. And the Baptists got the Walbury people who speak that language. And so there's been a Baptist mission there from very early days.
And has it had an impact on their community?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Our guest today is once again retired high school teacher Colin Youl, who's sharing with us about his life journey and about how he became involved in taking generations of students to an Aboriginal settlement northwest of Alice Springs. We'll hear more of Colin's story when we return right here on Real Faith.
The Word for Today is Australia's most widely read daily devotional, designed to give you practical teaching to keep you focused on your relationship with Jesus. Read it online or subscribe to the free printed edition at thewordfortoday.com.au.
You're listening to Real Faith, conversations with real people about how God works in their lives. If you want to know more about integrating faith into your life, our website is realfaith.org.au. Just go to the website and you'll find helpful articles about the impact faith can have on your life. Once again, that's realfaith.org.au.
Welcome back. I'm Eric Scadabo, and today our guest is once again retired high school teacher Colin Youl, who taught at Mount Evelyn Christian School for 38 years. Before the break, Colin began to share the story of how he became involved in taking generations of students to an Aboriginal settlement northwest of Alice Springs. Now here's more of that story.
When we were sitting around the campfire, the teachers from MEX, and all the Yapa people had gone to bed. Yapa is the term they use for Aboriginal people, right? Yapa. They'd all gone to bed. we're sitting around just shaking our heads over. The learning curve was so steep, we were falling off it, you know. And out of the darkness came this European person, white person, Wendy Barter, Nungala, and she said, "Where are you from?" He told her. Turns out she's almost exactly my age, within a few weeks, and she'd been living in the Territory the whole of her adult life, and now at Yuendamu, where she was a teacher linguist, and she said, "Well, if you're really teaching Aboriginal culture, you must teach language, because language and culture are so inextricably bound together."
Yeah.
And we said, "Well, how can we do that, you know?" And she was is still a very generous woman. So, long and the short of it, she came down to our school when she was on long service leave, visiting relatives down here. She grew up in Western Victoria. And she gave me my first lessons, and she put together big books with pictures from magazines and Warlpiri sentences underneath them. And so a Warlpiri language course came out of nowhere.
Oh, interesting, when I came to Australia and our children started to go to Mount Evelyn Christian School, I asked if there was any foreign languages taught, and they said, well, an Aboriginal language.
Yeah.
What's it, Warlpiri?
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, how did that come about?
Yeah.
And now, years later, I find out how that came about.
How it came about, all right. And so after that, my wife and I and our two older children, who were then 4 and 2, went to Yuendamu for a fortnight to, I suppose, give me a bit of a leg up on language and so on. It was much more intensive. It was just me, not the school trip. We stayed with Wendy and Frank Barter, and, oh, boy, hit over the head by that place. One day, a man and some women came to the door, knock on the door, and asked Wendy could they borrow her car, because they were having a ceremony at Wallara, 80 kilometres north. If Yuendamu's remote, this is remote with a capital R, you know, a cattle station, nothing else. And she said, "No, I won't let them take the car because I don't trust their driving." The driver only had one eye and no driver's license.
Oh, yeah, could be a problem, yeah.
Yeah. And she said, "Unless you want to go too, and I'll let you drive the car." Well, that was, talk about major turning points.
Yeah.
So I said, "Yep, I'll be in that." So with my sleeping bag, my pillow, a bag full of assorted groceries that she gave me, off we went for the weekend to an initiation ceremony. This is like something that the average white Australian will never experience, to be that immersed in a culture like that. Thing that struck me then and strikes me now and goes on striking me forever is that these people, who really have every reason to resent our presence and our impact on their lives, you know, and many of them have got grievances, personal grievances, because of discrimination and so on. And dead relatives who were shot in the massacres, you know, they are so welcoming. And so they just are, and furthermore, they love to laugh. They laugh with you and they laugh at you. So after that period, me getting the Warlpiri program off the ground, kind of, is my hidden curriculum, which is not really hidden at all, is to teach the culture, you know. And if kids pick up a bit of language, that's great. They certainly learn the songs. Probably your children can probably, between them, cobble together at least one song. After that, we discovered that the Baptist Union had some money set aside for non-evangelistic work among Aboriginal communities, and they hadn't spent it for ages. And so we rocked up the school and said, how about you send us to Yuendamu to live there for a while with a view to sharpening my Warlpiri, and we'll do some work. So we went for 6 months, and I taught that one-eyed, unlicensed driver, Andrew Jabberjari Spencer. I taught him to read and write in English for 6 months. I don't know whether we made all that much progress. We made some. Heather did some work at the school. And I also had the 2 blokes from the powerhouse, generated Yuendamu's electricity, come and study maths to sit their engine driver's ticket, which one of them eventually passed, and that was a major triumph.
Yeah. So it's obviously had a huge impact on your life.
Yeah.
What do you think the lasting legacy is for all those students, year after year after year, going to stay in the Aboriginal settlement and learning some of the culture and the language. What do you think is the lasting impact?
Well, I think there are a couple. One is the rather obvious one, that no one who's seriously sat through my classes can fall for the 3-card trick of saying this is a primitive language, therefore it's really simple, because it ain't. It's very complicated. It has pronoun usages that English doesn't even think of. Secondly, and I've experienced this many times, kids will say to me, now they're adults with children of their own, will say to me, I was at such and such a place and people were saying all Aboriginals are, drunk, lazy, educated, dirty. And I say to them, have you ever met any Aboriginal people? I've been to an Aboriginal settlement and this is what they're like.
Yeah,
they run their own
experience.
Run their own radio station in Alice Springs. They run a medical service. All of this stuff. That's really a lasting legacy.
Yeah.
And it does carry over into thinking about other cultures too.
Don't just take people's word for it about negative stereotypes of people. Meet the people firsthand.
Yep.
And see.
Yes, and that constantly keeps coming back to me. So I think that's a really, really important, lasting legacy.
Yeah.
It undermines racist knee-jerk attitudes beautifully.
And do you believe it has a spiritual legacy to it as well?
Well, I certainly hope so, because it depends on the individual kid largely, I suppose. But, they've experienced Yuendamu Church and Christian Walbury people, and through mediated by me, of course, thinking about how do you take a culture which is completely other, and when Christianity arrives, what does it look like? What's
the impact of the gospel and Jesus.
Yep, absolutely. There's a man, a wonderful saint of God at another settlement, Jerry Jungala, who's been a Baptist minister for a long time, very old man now. He sort of pioneered, really, making his people see some of the attitudes they had, which were very tribal and traditional, were okay and others were not. These ones are contra-gospel, and we have to think seriously about them. And instead of talk about colonialism, what all white michos can't help, almost can't help, is saying, we know what is best. This is the way you should go. Far, far better for the people to sit with a cup of tea and talk about it and say, how do we deal with this?
So it's a uniquely indigenous expression of the faith, not something imposed top-down.
Yeah.
Is that what you're getting at? Yeah.
The Baptist missions have finally woken up to the fact that these are indigenous churches and they have to be self-sustaining. And so they run their own church, with the missions now having very little input, but certainly not leadership or oversight. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're quickly running out of time.
Yeah, sure.
But that was just one aspect of your teaching career. Any final thoughts to kind of wrap up your life? There's so much more we could talk about.
Well, teaching John as long as I have, and because I've got a beard and an earring, I must be wise. I'm treated as a bit
works for me.
I'm treated as a bit of an egghead at my church. People will often say to me, Colin, you know a bit about such and such, the gospel or the Bible. And I do know more than many people. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And my friend David inspired me, after he was dead actually, to actually do some theological study, and that's just ongoing. And I find, the more I learn, that old axiom is, the more you learn, the more you understand that you don't really know very much.
Yeah. The more you know, the more you know you don't know. Yeah.
Does it ever?
Well, I guess it all boils down to, you consider yourself a lifelong student.
Yeah.
And you encourage your students to look at it that way as well.
This year, despite now we're living on 2 pensions, I'm undertaking another subject, and it's going to cost $500. I'm auditing it. I'm not doing the assessment. But I'm just reveling in it. I love being a student.
You're a student again.
Yeah.
In your late 70s.
And I look like a student. Though strangely enough, students these days have short back and sides and wear ties and do business studies, but never mind. I tell you what, I'm not a hippie, but one of the spin-offs from the 60s is this. I always tell kids, do what you like. Don't do what you think's going to earn you heaps of money. Because in the end, heaps of money are not what it's cracked up to be.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's one lesson we can learn from your life journey.
Yeah.
Is you decided to do you, to uniquely be Colin Youl, ponytail and all, and had a huge impact on the lives of students over 30-some years. And would you say it was all worth it? It was fulfilling?
Oh, absolutely. There are details of my life I'd change, but that broad outline, no, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. No, I'd learn quicker, maybe. Yeah.
Colin Youl, thank you so much for sharing a bit of your story with us today.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. American accent creeps in. It's so contagious, isn't it? Thanks for giving me the opportunity, Eric.
Oh, my pleasure. Well, that was part 2 of my conversation with retired high school teacher Colin Youl, who taught at Mount Evelyn Christian School for 38 years. And it was great to hear how God used his unique and sometimes unorthodox gifts to impact so many students' lives over the years. As we heard, one of his lasting legacies was being involved in taking generations of students, including my own children, to Yuendamu Aboriginal Settlement, about 300 kilometers northwest of Alice Springs. As Colin pointed out, it's hard to remain prejudiced against people who you've spent time with and got to know. These experiences have gone a long way in the lives of students to reduce racism and promote understanding of different cultures. Well, thank you so much for joining us for part 2 of Colin Youl's story. Until next time, I'm Eric Scadabo. So long, and God bless.
You've been listening to Real Faith, and if you have any questions or comments, you can send us a message through our website, realfaith.org.au. That's realfaith.org.au.
Real Faith is a production of Vision Christian Media.
This program is a production of Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, see vision.org.au.